say some I don't know. It takes a little more than what you show, and that's yesterday. Yeah, yesterday.
The Bobby Finn Knows Everyone podcast is sponsored by Unreal, and that's UNRL Unreal. You've seen that clothing brand around the Twin Cities. You've probably seen it around the world at this point because they're an awesome, really cool clothing brand. They're not VC backed. No, that's not it. They are an independent clothing brand who was started by an entrepreneur with $300 and a dream. And they make clothing that's centered around the athlete. So from big guys to short guys, super athletic guys to guys like me who are weekend warriors, it is a great clothing brand. And check out unrl.co and you will get a 15% off your next order if you enter pull tab 15. Just go to unrl.co, not .com, .co, and you'll get 15% off your next order when you enter pull tab 15. We're also sponsored by Jimmy's Salad Dressings and Dips. It is slaw season. That means if you're out having a picnic, you're out grilling, you want to get that Jimmy's coleslaw because they've got 3 types of coleslaw sauces. Original, pineapple, and fat-free because it is incredible slaw, and you can put it on your plate next to your hot burger, next to your hot beans, and it's got that awesome balance. So find Jimmy's Coleslaw at Cover Hy-Vee. Check out their website at jimmysdressing.com too if you want, or you just go to Cover Hy-Vee. I take a right. It's right there in the cold section. That's how you know it's good stuff. It's not in the, the warm section. It's got to be chilled. It's got to be cooled down. And they're local. I know everybody's looking for good local brands. Jimmy's is just that. So like Bobby always says, Jimmy's Salad Dressings and Dips. Don't you be messing
with the dressing. And that was my co-host, Tommy Lord. And we want to welcome you to Bobby Finn Knows Everyone, a Pull Tab Sports production. I am Bobby Finn, born and bred on St. Paul's East Side, where it was all about looking out for each other, blue-collared hard work, and telling it like it is, no BS. Sometimes your reputation got you in a little trouble, but other times it helped you out. As usual, I'm going to strike this one out because I'm reading. But hey, today with us, Bobby Finn Knows Everyone, is our special guest, Tom Maher from MUFON. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
So I've seen you on all sorts of shows. I think you were on KSTP, you've been on podcasts, you're the real deal. So listen up, everybody. How'd you get into this? Are you like, have you seen something? Are you just passionate about it? How does it start?
Yeah, so I'm 54 years old, believe it or not. But through the course of my life, you see lots of stuff. You see lots of stuff that you got to question, you can't explain, you're not sure about. And I have seen lots of stuff where I'm not really sure. And could this be something? Could it not be something? But I've only had 2 instances where I'm like, really, okay, that I can't write that off and explain. And one of them was when I was preschool age. So that obviously preschool, it's very young. And at the time, this is the early 70s, and what is our media full of? Our media is full of the Jetsons and the Flintstones with the Great Gazoo, and there's the Far Out Space Nuts, and there's Lost in Space, and there's Star Trek. So there's all this imagery and messages about extraterrestrials and off-planet life and things like that already in the culture. So it's something we're already kind of born into. So I always kind of had an interest, and it just seemed natural because, as far as I can remember, that was always images in pop culture. So I got into grade school. I started reading books and I was kind of curious about it, and it kind of followed through junior high and high school. High school is where I had my second event where I really couldn't explain it, and then I just kind of followed along from that. And it was in my early 20s. I think is when I first realized, because I'd heard of MUFON, read about it in the books and things, but found out there was a MUFON chapter in Minnesota. And I was like watching late night public access cable, and there's like a UFO show on. I was like, because I got back from the bar.
How was that? Was that really weird? Was it nerdy, or what was it like?
It was interesting, and I was watching, really interested. There's a MUFON chapter. I was watching the credits roll by, and like the copyright was like 2 or 3 years old. And they're probably not active anymore. So I kind of blew it off. Well, 4 or 5 years later, again, late night, watching, there's another UFO show on public. Watch it again. It's now the copyright's only a couple years old. So they were around. So this kind of happened. I kept kind of seeing this stuff. And I went, I'm going to look up and see if there's a chapter is actually still alive and still exists. And sure, like the late 90s, I did that. And they're still there. So, okay, now I know they're around.
Cool.
And I'm not going to go because the last thing I want to do is be stuck in a room full of, let's say it together, UFO nuts. Don't want that. We don't want to be associated with that. So I didn't really go to for a while. And then finally I kind of went, you know what? I've got this curiosity. I want to know what they're about. I'm just going to go to a meeting, check one out. If there's tinfoil hats everywhere and things are off the wall, I can just leave and never come back, you know. And I went. It wasn't that bad, and people were pretty normal, and things were interesting and stuff. And they had a scientific approach, which MUFON is all about the scientific process of investigating UFOs. And after a couple of years in attending the meetings, I did become a member, and then after a while, I decided, you know, I'd like to be a little more involved. So I became a field investigator. So it's a process to become a field investigator.
Field investigator, yeah, I like it.
Once I was a field investigator, we had one of our chapter directors was like going to step down. He's like, hey, you need to be the chapter director. At the state time, at that time they're called state directors. Now they're chapter directors. So I became the state director at that time, and I've been the state director ever since. So it's been a wild and crazy
ride. The ranks.
I want to go back to your second episode.
My second episode.
Because I think the way you said it, you were a teenager.
Yep.
And were you with somebody and it blew your mind?
I was, that's funny.
Whoa, what are we talking about here, Bobby?
Hey, because everybody in euphoria, your brain goes a little crazy when you first have it.
Did you get it on with an alien? What's going on?
No, I did not get it on with an alien. So I was with a group of people. And one of the interesting things was we all had very different reactions to what was happening. I was very curious and I wanted to make contact. One guy freaked out and went straight to the tent and see you guys in the morning, going to bed. And some of the other guys just kind of sat around and hung out. And I was like, I grabbed let me tell you the story, because this one guy was really upset that I was really curious about it. So
no mushrooms involved.
No what?
No mushrooms?
Not that I'm aware of, unless they snuck it in. I mean, as far as I know, there's no mushrooms involved. So one of our high school teachers, one of our art teachers was a very cool guy, and we had heard him tell stories about he would do these canoe trips down the St. Croix River. And so one year we went down a very short trip, like a 3-day trip down the St. Croix River. And it was like a handful of guys, and it was a lot of fun. So and there was this one island toward the end of the trip. We spent the night on the island, very cool island in the St. Croix River. So I'm not sure if we were in Wisconsin or Minnesota technically, because we're on an island in the river, and the river is the border. So come the next year, we wanted to do a bigger trip. It was about a week-long trip. We want to start further up north near Superior and come all the way down. Again, the last night, same island. So we went to the same island again to camp out. Nice big island. And we did the campfire. We're all sitting around. So we're sitting in a circle. And I'm kind of sitting, I guess, facing south. So I've got Wisconsin on my left and Minnesota on my right. And I'm not sure what state we're technically in. And we're just sitting there talking as the sun's gone down, and I'm kind of glance off to my left, so to the Wisconsin side. And way off in the distance, I see a street light there. I'm like, okay, street light, no big deal. And because of it's near the river, no one's allowed to build so close to the river because it's like protected land. So I thought, no. Street light off in the distance. I've seen street lights, nothing really to make note of. And we kept talking and chatting and just kind of BSing and stuff, and roasted marshmallows and whatnot. I look back later, now there's 2 street lights on. Oh, okay, it's 2 street lights now. Surprised they didn't go on at the same time. You'd think they would, but man, it's Wisconsin. You know how those people are. So, so we're going along and chatting, and I look back a little bit later, and now there's 3 street lights down there. I thought, that's and they're spaced pretty equally distant apart, so it seems reasonable. 3 street lights evenly spaced, but kind of going on at strange times, and I didn't think much of it. And we're just talking and talking. So this whole thing takes place over the course of a few hours. I look back again, and now there's 2 street lights. The middle street light has burnt out. Middle street light's burnt out, but the 2 outside ones are still there. So that's kind of strange that the street light burnt out. But hey, street lights burn out. It happens. So we're just kind of sitting there talking and chatting and stuff. And I look back, and now the middle street light is back again. And I went, okay, so the street light burnt out. Someone called it in and reported it. They sent someone out and they replaced the street light in the time that we've been. That seems a little strange. And so I'm kind of noticing it more now. And then I look back a little bit later, and there's 4 street lights. So now I'm kind of watching them. And so there's 2 of them are kind of close together. Then there's one in the center and one on the far side. And then so I'm kind of watching a little more. And then the one on the far side, but then another one rises up out of the trees. So it's at the same level. So now there's 5 street lights in a row, kind of just hovering above the trees. So now I'm kind of watching more. And again, now the center one drops down into the trees. Going, no, this is interesting. So I'm watching over the course of I don't know how long, the lights are going down into the trees and coming back up, sometimes together, sometimes individually at different rates. Sometimes they'd go down and be down for what seemed like a long time. Sometimes they'd kind of go down and come back up rather quickly. And then at one point they all just kind of stopped, and they all stood, they were just kind of frozen there above the tree line. And then it became very obvious to me that they appeared to be moving in our direction. They were getting bigger and kind of further apart. So they're like moving our way. And I'm like, well, that's a little disconcerting, but kind of interesting. And then they stopped again. Then they started doing the up and down thing again. So now I'm really paying attention to it, really kind of watching it. And I don't know how long this had been going on, but finally, because we're sitting in a circle. So basically, half of us are kind of facing it and half of us are facing away from it. And finally, the guy sitting 2 seats to my right, he finally goes, okay, is it just me or is anybody else watching those lights going up and down the trees? And half of us go, yeah, you see it too. So half of us are watching it. No one was saying a thing about it. So one of my friends, this is just not his bag. UFOs, extraterrestrials, aliens, it's not in his paradigm. It's not in his reality. It's not his deal. So he took a look, saw the lights, said, okay, have a good night, guys. I'll see you in the morning. He got up, went straight to the tent, went right to bed. A couple of the other guys, they're just kind of hanging out and just kind of watching. And I was really excited about it because I'm like, now we've got Kraft here, and Kraft probably has occupants, and can I make contact with occupants? So I grab my flashlight. I go down to the canoes where our canoes are, and I start flashing the flashlight on. And the one guy got really, really upset. He came down and he goes, what are you doing? What are you doing? Don't flash them. Don't send your light. Stop it. They're going to come down here. They're going to stick up your button. I'm like, dude, relax, because he's afraid of me getting abducted, or all of us getting abducted and probed and whatnot. I'm sitting here thinking I could be one of the first humans making contact with extraterrestrials, which wouldn't have been true, but that was my thought, was I can make contact and I can communicate with them. So I was really excited about it.
It's like maybe they're eradicating Packer fans from the world, like going down, pulling them out, and getting rid of them one by one.
They did it. I'm going to give them an F on that. They didn't do such a good job. They need to come back.
It's more than
if they're going to start the job, they need to come back and finish the job. So,
I think I told that story about my uncle and my grandpa, my great uncle. Yeah. He was an electrician, and they were just pranksters, right? Yeah. So I grew up on Highway 61, and they would fly a kite. And he'd have this fine wire go up the kite. And at night, they would just plug it in. So cars kept stopping, thinking there's a UFO, right? Right on Highway 61, but they were just idiots having a good time. But
and for MUFON, we get probably about, I would say I think it's 5 to 6% of our cases we determine are hoaxes. So your friend could be on our database, could be as one of our hoaxers. So
that was a hoaxer for sure.
So it got reported, so it may not have gotten reported.
We've got a lot of great national stories which we can cover. There's also, I've heard you talk, Tom, a lot about good Minnesota stories. Mm-hmm. Is it, I mean, does MUFON get these stories do they go directly to you and say, hey, you got to cover this, or do you guys uncover them, or like, and has that number, gone way up in the last few years because of cameras and because of phones and all that?
Yeah. So the way a case, so someone has to have a sighting or see something, and then they go to our website and they report a case, report a sighting. Then it goes to headquarters. Headquarters determines what chapter it's going to go to. So obviously they go generally by states. So California is actually broken into 2 different chapters, but states or countries. And then they'll kind of do some stuff like the valet classification, like, close encounter of the third kind or whatever they think it is. And they'll do some other stuff, and then they'll send it to the chapter. And at that point, either the chapter director, or in our state, most of our chief investigators will assign it to our field investigators, and our field investigators will go and investigate the case. And there's an interesting trend, because we have public meetings every month at the New Brighton Community Center, and I do reports on how many cases have come in Minnesota and across the country. And for a while across the world, we were trending up really drastically until about, I think, 2015. Then we dropped down quite a bit, and now we're kind of steady around 7 to 10,000 per year, not in Minnesota, but globally. So it was really curious. We're not sure why it was trending really high and then all of a sudden dropped down as very steady. So, but in Minnesota, an average month in Minnesota is about 6 to 8 cases per month. It tends to go down in February, March, because people aren't outside. And when it's summer month, we expect it to go up a little bit. And now, as far as most people are familiar with SpaceX and the Starlink satellites, when those were being launched, our cases in Minnesota almost tripled. They more than doubled. They were about triple. So
Starlink, if you haven't seen it, it's like what, 8 stars in a row, 8
it could be 8, it could be 20 or more. So
and they just travel together in a straight line, and everybody thinks they're seeing
my living room. I haven't put it on that roof yet.
Bobby has a Starlink,
yeah. And sometimes before they're even in a straight line, they're in clusters. They're in big clusters before they're in a straight line. So they could look almost like a shadow or a cloud or like a quote unquote fleet going across. But they eventually get in a straight line, and then they go out. And if you go to, I think it's heavens-above.com, you can actually look and see where all the Starlink satellites are. Or you get a view of the planet, and little red dots where all the Starlink satellites are, and they are everywhere, except for like the Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle. But below those circles, there's like red dots everywhere. So there's just all kinds of Starlink
because the
satellites
Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle are like
They're beacons.
they're
for
beacons. They're already inhabited
extraterrestrials.
by extraterrestrials.
Yeah, it's funny because I was actually looking at that yesterday. So there's all those little dots, but there's a few spots where it looks like there's little red streaks going across, and those red streaks are those lines of Starlink satellites that are still in line that aren't in their position yet. So
what are some of your favorite Minnesota cases? And I know there's the one past that's very was it
Over by Marshall,
Minnesota, Warren, Minnesota.
Warren, yeah,
but what's a more current? Well, maybe we talk about that one, but then also I'd love to hear like a more current one that you're like, whoa, that is. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So do you want to hear the Marshall, Minnesota? Because there's another one that I like that's from the 60s. It's called the Long Prairie case.
I haven't heard that one, but yeah.
So Long Prairie case, I want to say it's roughly 1962. So it's one important thing about that is 1962. This is before the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out. So that's kind of plays into this because it actually was, the witness was a radio DJ from, I think, KYDL in Long Prairie. And he was it happened on, excuse me, like an August night. And there's a stretch from Long Prairie to, I forget what city it is. And it's almost basically a straight highway, except there's one spot where there's a little S curve in it. And that's part of the story. He says he was driving, I think, to Long Prairie. He was coming around the curve. And there is like a rocket sitting in the highway. Just sitting in the highway. And the thing is, as he was approaching it, his motor died and his radio went off, which is what happens in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And you think, oh, well, he saw that in the movie. Well, no, this was in the early 60s. The movie didn't exist at that point. So this is not something where they see it in a movie and now they're making it up. This is something where he didn't have that as a reference point. And he was a 19-year-old DJ too, so he was a young guy. And he was trying to get to the station. And I don't know where he got this idea, but he thought, well, I'm going to get out and I'm going to push that thing off the road so I can drive by. Even though his car had stalled, he wanted to push it off the road so he could drive by.
Off the road.
Yeah, and it was like a cylinder with like the three fins, like standing upright, like very stereotypical things that you would think you'd see. And he goes to approach the rocket, and from, I don't know if it was behind one of the fins or how they got out, but he was approached by three, I don't know if you want to call them entities or robots, or they're commonly described as tin can aliens, because he said they're about the size of a tin can. They looked like tin cans, and they kind of waddled out on two little legs, and they confronted him and put a third leg down. So it's like a little tripod. And he said there was no face and there was no eyes, but he said he got the sense that they were looking at him and he was looking at them. So they did the stare down for, he said it seemed like forever, but it was probably not that long. And then for some reason, the little tin cans kind of waddled back and got up in the ship, and the ship took off again, which sounds like just unbelievable. So he hopped in his car, because his car started up again once the craft had left. He went to the radio station just jacked, and he's like, he got someone to come back. I don't know if he got the police, but he got someone to come back to the spot and look at it. And we're not sure if this is related to it or not, but as they're looking at the scene, there were like three oily strips on the pavement there, about an inch wide. And I don't know if that was related to the craft or if it just was coincidence that it was there. So, and you'd think, okay, so radio DJ, 19 years old, he's probably just full of it. Well, seems reasonable. But we also got reports on that same night. There was a farmer that reported something circling around his barn, and there were hunters in that area at night too that reported seeing rockets flying through the sky in Minnesota. And there was two police officers from a neighboring county that claimed to see rockets in the sky that night in Minnesota. So it's like, the story just sounds unbelievable, but then you've got all this corroborating evidence, and it was actually the Minneapolis, what I think at the time was just the Minneapolis Tribune and the St. Paul Pioneer Press both did stories on that. I forget, like the next day or within a week. So if you look up Tin Can Aliens, Long Prairie, Minnesota, you can probably find. And if you want to go back to the archives of, I haven't done this, but going back to the archives of the Minneapolis Tribune and of course the St. Paul Pioneer Press, you can see the stories that they printed. But I didn't check out the stories. But and he actually. He didn't report it to MUFON because this is like 62. MUFON didn't exist. Sure. But he reported it to, I believe, NUFORC, which NUFORC is the National UFO Reporting Center. And it's interesting, too, because there's a spot in the report for him to make sketches of what he drew. So he drew what he saw. So he does a little sketch of his rocket, which I've got a copy of that. And there's a little sketch of the little tin can alien. I've seen artist rendition of it where they've really fancied up the tin can alien, but I've seen that. And his comments are in there. And he sounded really, really upset about it. He said, I can't believe that stuff like this exists and you're not telling people. He's like, this is like a great crime against humanity that stuff like this is out there and we're not telling anybody about it. So he seemed to really
He was adamant. He was adamant that he saw something.
Oh yeah. I mean, he had his face off with these 3 tin cans. It's like, and I think about that, because people had asked me about, what do you think the tin cans were? Could the tin cans have been drones? Possibly. Could the tin cans have been artificial life? Possibly. Could there have been living beings inside the tin cans? Because we think, aliens got to be roughly our size. Well, maybe not, so who knows if there were like inside little creatures in there controlling it, we'll probably never know the answer to that. But I think that's what a really cool story with the corroborating evidence from the farmers and the hunters and the police officers. How do you write all of that off? You can write off the DJ story, but the stuff surrounding it.
Yeah, you had a bunch of stories from that area.
And when he reported it, he didn't know about the farmers. He didn't know about the police officers. He didn't know about the hunters. So
I wonder if that's where Close Encounters of the Third Kind got their story regarding.
I think sounds like a good Valvoline commercial.
The 3 tin cans and oil slick.
Speaking of Valvoline, so the other one is Warren, Minnesota. There was a Sheriff Val Johnson who was driving down the highway in 1979. I wrote down
79 is correct.
And he sees a light in the middle of the highway, and he stops, and that light looks him down, and he looks it down and just flies straight through the windshield of his car.
Yeah, so that's kind of what happened. So now Val Johnson was a very dedicated, very committed police officer, or a sheriff, I guess, and he was very into his routine and he knew exactly what he wanted. So when he started every shift, he took the clock at the headquarters and synchronized his watch to it. So his watch in the headquarters was synchronized. Then he synchronized the clock in his car to his watch. So all 3 clocks are now synchronized. So he was out doing his patrol very close to the North Dakota border, and he was going on the highway, and there was like an intersection. It looked like down the highway on the intersection, he saw a light down there. He said it appeared to be about the size of a volleyball. He thought it was too high off the ground to be a car. He thought maybe a plane had come down or something like that. So he turned to investigate, and I don't remember if he was a quarter mile away or a mile and a half away or something like that, but it was quite a distance away. And then instantly, it was like right on top of him is how he described it. And he remembers hearing glass shattering, and then he doesn't remember anything until he woke up. And
he had all chipped teeth, I heard, and burns on his eyes, like welder's burns on his eyes.
He may have had chipped teeth. I'd have to check. That does sound familiar, but yeah, he had what they described as mild welder's burns. His car had skidded off the side of the road. It skidded like, I think, about 100 feet or 100, and it was turned sideways. And when he woke up, so no one knew about it till he woke up. When he woke up, he radioed for help, and the officer arrived on scene, and they called for an ambulance. And they did find out eventually, they realized that his watch and his car, the clocks were still synced, but they were off by 14 minutes from the clock at headquarters. So there was there's our missing time, which people, you tell, where's the missing time? So where do those 14 minutes of stuff go? So yeah, he definitely had an interesting experience. And it's interesting too, because his squad car had very peculiar damage. So it was like a 1979 Ford LTD or something like that. It was big cars. And the headlights on the left, there's 2 bulbs, and on the right, there's 2 bulbs. Well, the damage in the car was very much in a straight line from the front to the back on the driver's side. So the headlight on the outside of the 2 was just fine. The headlight just to the inside was shattered, and there was like a line of damage coming up the hood. There was like a dent in the hood. Then when we got to the windshield, there's like a big crack coming up the windshield. But there's like 4 different impact points on it. When you get to the top of the car, the antenna, because he had an antenna on the passenger side on the right, and there's an antenna on the top of the car, and then an antenna on the hood. And I believe the antenna on the top, near the base of it, it was bent at, I think, like a 60-degree angle, and then the antenna on the hood, on the trunk hood, was bent at like a 90-degree angle. So they weren't bent the same. If you think about it, antennas on cars back then, the base of them, there's that big thick spring on the bottom. So if you hit the antenna, the spring is going to give before the antenna bends. But these were like actually bent. So it's like, well, what could create that kind of force to bend the antenna? It's like it was almost physically bent like that. So and Honeywell and Ford Motor Companies came out to inspect the car, and they examined the windshield of the car, and they couldn't figure out how the damage had occurred, because from their analysis, the best they could determine is those 4 impact points on the windshield. They say the impact came from inside and outside the car simultaneously. So how they was getting 4 impacts like that? So just lots of questions about that. And
that's insane. And the cool thing is, you can go to Warren, Minnesota. They have a museum set up, and you can see that actual car that's still there today, and all the information.
They were this close to sending the car in to get repaired so they could put it back in use. And at the last minute, someone said, "Hang on a second, wait." This might actually be important. Let's not fix anything. Let's leave it as it is. So they put it in the museum and they take it out occasionally, and it's been photographed. You can get right up close to it, and it's been, so you can still go see, and it still draws people from around the country to Warren, Minnesota. It's not like Minneapolis where you can fly into Minneapolis and it's right there. No, you can fly into Minneapolis and drive like 5 or 6 hours up north to this tiny little town and go to the museum to see the UFO car. So,
question: do you think that the military has technology that they're not telling us, and it's just like, okay, that's a drone on steroids? Like, that is just new technology that they don't want people to know because they are developing some crazy ass stuff that's going to go deep into space.
See, when you get into the whole ufology and the UFO topic, there's so many rabbit holes you can go down in conspiracy theories. It's hard to really tell what's what. And I mean, you can take a single topic, you can rabbit hole it just for as long as you want. So what does the government have and what doesn't the government have? So the way I kind of describe it like this, everybody's heard the saying that, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Well, I think a lot of times when it comes to the government, the right thumb doesn't know what the right forefinger is doing. I mean, it doesn't matter how close they are. There's still people that,
certain people have clearance, some people don't have clearance, so they're not telling everybody what's going on.
Some things are very compartmentalized, and there can be people in the government who really believe we've got nothing. And then the guy across the building knows a whole lot more. And so it's really hard to say people will say, look at our cell phones. Our cell phones supposedly have more computing technology than what they used to land on the moon. Or, that was like rooms full of huge computers. So
do you think that happened? Do you think that's lie?
Do I think what?
They landed on the moon or not?
That's the thing. 'Cause I hear so many things, and I kind of say, my jury's out on everything.
Yeah.
But as far as landing on the moon, actually, Mythbusters did a really cool couple episodes on moon landing, on the moon landing conspiracy theory, and they took a whole bunch of theories and they tested it, and they did some very, very convincing stuff that really leads you to believe that we did land on the moon. And there's supposedly that disc up there. You can bounce the light off the disc. So there's supposedly these man-made objects. And I don't know if our telescopes can see the stuff now, but I believe we probably did. But then even the moon, there's so many conspiracies about the moon. Is the moon a real object? Is it a natural object? Or is it an artificial object?
Did we put the moon up there? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's how we put I don't think we put the moon up there, but
the Russians did.
I don't think
the pyramid builders.
Well, and there's you hear stories of the tribes in Africa that say they in their tribal history they recall before the moon was there, and they recall the moon being moved there. So it's what is that about? What is so they recall the move. Then of course our scientists will tell. Here's how the moon was created by an asteroid hitting the Earth. And so,
interesting.
Like I said, my jury's out on pretty much everything because really, as soon as you come to a conclusion and say, this is the truth, this is what it is, you kind of cut off all other possibilities. And I just think, I'm not sure anybody has all the answers. I'm not sure who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth. And that recent NASA whistleblower, UFO whistleblower, he was the one talking about we've got craft, we've recovered bodies, which is not a new story. We've heard that before. So
but he maybe just because he had such high ranking that he was probably a high ranking official that actually is the first person to. Not first person, but a person with credibility to say it. So he claims that we have a team that goes out and recovers alien spacecrafts. And he said sometimes the pilots die and we bring those back too. And I heard there's a downed spacecraft in Brazil and the US sent out a team to recover it. And the aliens were walking around the people. And that's what the people of Brazil were saying, like these town folk, and that the US zoomed in there, grabbed everything, and came back to the U.S.
Yeah, there's the Kecksburg incident. I forget if Kecksburg is in Indiana, but there's the Kecksburg incident where, and it was seen coming across Canada and like through a few different states and crashed in Kecksburg. And then not too long after that, the military shows up and supposedly there's a semi-truck leaving with something under a large tarp that seems to be kind of acorn shaped. And, whatever happened in Kecksburg, well, we probably won't know about that. And where did it go? Where did they take it? So they seem to be on it pretty quick. So, and even with, I think, Roswell, they were on top of stuff pretty quick. So
it's at Stargate SG-1.
All right, let's take this break real quick to talk about a couple more sponsors. We'll do Bobby's Bar Review, and then we're going to get into more of this, not conspiracy theories, but more of these more modern day UFO stories. So let's talk real quick about Chill Boys. And if you're like me, summer is hot and you need Chill Boys underwear to keep you cool. And that's because Chill Boys boxer briefs are made with these special bamboo fabric. They keep the boys cool downstairs where you need it most. Don't be fooled by imitation underwear. You need these because they are refreshing. They're cool. I've tried them out. I'm not a boxer brief fan. I'm a boxer brief guy now because of Chill Boys and only Chill Boys. Don't take my word for it. Try some of these life-changing underwear yourself. Visit chillboys.com and keep your boys cool this summer.
And also, let's talk about Buchanan. Stanley Cup is over, but it doesn't mean you don't want to keep your hair, your mutton chops, your mustaches. You don't want to trust them with any brand. Buchanan makes hardworking grooming products for hardworking guys, and their products will help you keep your facial hair in championship form. From their beard wash and their balms to beard oil, they have your back and your face. Stock up on Buchanan.com. Use code BEARD10 for 10% off your next order. Buchanan is a Minnesota company. A portion of the proceeds of Buchanan sales benefit U.S. military veterans. Work harder, smell better with Buchanan.
All right, so let's do this quick. Let's do Bobby's bar review. And Bobby always likes to talk about his favorite bars. He gives them a little bit of a score, Tom, for you that you're keeping score at home. And Bobby does a different bar each week. If the good news is if Bobby does your bar, usually he likes every bar he goes to, let's be honest. But Bobby,
the more beer they give him, the more he likes the bars.
Yeah. Bobby, what's going to be your the Bobby bar review of the week?
Well, the bar review of the week only fits, right? So it's Space Aliens bar up in Monticello.
Oh, I like it. How fitting.
It is. It's a place to go.
I've never been. I always drive by and I go, I want to go in there.
You have to try. You have to stop in there sometime.
Space Aliens. What do you think?
Benefit. I mean, luckily my kids had tournaments up in the area.
Okay.
So you need to occupy their time if it's 4 or 5 hours. So it's just a big, the big playroom for the kids, a bunch of video games, all these different things. And they do have a bar and they do have food.
All right. So what did you think of the drinks out of 10?
Well, the drinks, I think we were on the beer that day, but I did have a couple JMO gingers. So I would give it probably a 7.5, 8.
Wow. All
Just
right.
because I'm not a beer guy, I was getting a little bloated.
How about the atmosphere? It's Space Aliens.
Well,
do they have any aliens walking around?
I didn't, except for the statues and stuff they had everywhere. But the atmosphere, I mean, when you got 500 kids running around, it kind of sucks. But
I suppose.
But overall, when you're with your buddies and a couple parents trying to kill some time, there's nothing wrong with having a couple drinks.
Okay. Out of 10?
I'd give it a 6.5.
All right. So we're going service.
Service was good. Those girls wanted to pull their hair out of their head because trying to, fill up all these waters and root beers and everything else. But as far as service goes, I'd give it an 8.
All right, 8. And then did you have food?
We did have food. It was a bunch of pizzas, and it's, it's kind of that, old Chuck E. Cheese pizza. I think they were piecing it together like that. You ever heard that one before?
Oh yeah. Don't go into that conspiracy.
Won't go into that
Okay.
yet, but, so it's the pizzas. So I'd give the pizzas probably a 7.
7. All right. And then real quick, did it have any of these following? Did it have golden tea, pull tabs, or touch tunes?
It had 2 of the 3. It did have golden tea, which made me happy. It had touch tunes, and what was the other one?
Pull tabs?
Pull tabs. No pull tabs.
All right. So where are you going here?
Yeah. Overall, we're gonna give her probably a 6.8.
6.8.
Yeah.
Altogether.
But it is a good place to bring your kids.
All right. Check out Space Aliens for those UFO lovers like us on the podcast. And I've always wanted to go on Space Aliens. I've never been in a Space Aliens.
It's worth going.
Bobby said it's a good bar, and that's the best thing about it. If you make it on Bobby's bar review, chances are Bobby likes it. All right, Tom Maher, back to you. Tom Maher with MUFON, that's Mutual UFO Network, and he is the chapter president, director, chapter director. Tom, you talked a little bit about the whistleblower here in the U.S. How about the Las Vegas thing? So Las Vegas, just recently, some cop was out doing a traffic stop. Him and the guy see it like on his chest camera, like a light go across the sky. Hour later, a family calls in that there's a UFO that crashed in their backyard. They see 10-foot beings walk around. And today, I believe it was today, the NASA came out and said, that was just an asteroid. How do you explain it? How do you explain all that? What did you think of that story?
The story is interesting. It's funny too, because when you get into the whole conspiracy things, one of the conspiracy things that's out there is at some point before there's true disclosure, there's going to be a hoaxed alien invasion of the planet. It's supposed to fool everybody. So when I heard this stuff about the Las Vegas, is this the tip off? Is this the beginning of it? Which it didn't turn out to be, at least not so far. So, but as far as the asteroid stuff, possible, maybe not. I've seen the video of it going down. I've also seen like a ring doorbell cam where it's like looking at a driveway and all of a sudden it gets really, really, really bright for a while. Then you hear like a thunk and it goes dark again. And they say that's the same thing. So, but then the family's got this story, and it's really hard to say. So 8 to 10 foot aliens, not the most common size that we hear about, but it's not unheard of. And the way they described them. So, and then all of a sudden the family's kind of silent for a while. And I've heard stories that since then there was lots of sightings of men in black in the area shortly after that, especially around their house. And then now I think the family's kind of come out and gone public again, but they're still sticking to their story. So what is the truth? That's the thing. That's another reason why I kind of reserve judgment on stuff, because I just don't know. And that's, and one of the things that kind of irks me is there's people that, say they're skeptics. They're skeptics of, and I go, okay, that's fine. When you talk to people who say they're skeptics, I don't really think they're skeptical when I talk to them. I think they're just cynical.
Oh, sure.
Because it's like, it doesn't matter facts. What you do, what you say, what you show, they're just not going to go because they know better, and it's not. So I think I'm skeptical. And to me, a skeptic is someone who's willing to look at both sides and examine stuff and not just jump to a quick conclusion. It's willing to question the stuff. So like, a lot of the cases that we get in Minnesota, like the Mystic Lake casino lights, you'd think that'd be nothing, but there's also the lens flare. So let's talk about the Mystic Lake casino lights. We probably get a Mystic Lake casino lights case maybe once or twice a year. So if you're familiar with Mystic Lake Casino, they've got the big spotlights, and they'll shine them up in the sky and they'll do spins and stuff. And sometimes they'll just do it up into the clouds, and it's like a circle of dots there. And sometimes you can see the beams of light going up, so you really know what it is. But sometimes you can't see the beams of light going up there. And if you're not from the area and you don't know what that is, you look at this cloud and there's these circle of lights in it. And sometimes they start rotating, and you could easily go, wow, there's a craft up in the clouds that's now rotating. And suddenly the lights go out and you're like, they just disappeared. Well, it could seem so a very sincere person having seen that can report their UFO sighting. And we kind of go, oh yeah, okay, it's the Mystic Lake casino lights. So, that happens. And another one that's pretty common is lens flares, because everybody's got cameras now. The cameras are getting better and better. One of the things that we find out, and that we actually got a case like this. I was investigating a case like this recently, or it just came in, of a lens flare. So a lens flare, someone will be taking pictures of stuff, and they won't see anything when they're taking the pictures. But when they either look at it on their phone or when they have it developed, there's this green orb in it, and it seems, and sometimes it's photographs, sometimes it's video, and they can see the green orb moving around. So wow, I caught something. I didn't know I was even catching something. Well, what that is, it's a lens flare, and what a lens flare is, you've got to have a very, very strong light source, usually the sun. But if it's very dark out, a street light could cause a lens flare too. So you've got a very strong light source compared to the surrounding area, and the light comes into the camera, and it's actually doing a reflection and glaring off the lenses inside the camera. So you don't see it looking out through yourself, but the camera picks it up, and it's usually like a little green circle or blob, and it's if you don't know what you're looking at, it can be very confusing. So we get cases of lens flares, and it's not a few times a year, so it's not too uncommon.
Let's talk about that Tic Tac UFO that the Navy fighter pilot saw. He's flying above San Diego, and they see this Tic Tac shaped object, and it doesn't look like it's flying with propulsion from this planet. It's going back and forth, up and down, zigzag here or there, like showing up, and then it goes from 60,000 feet all the way down to basically the water, the height of the water. Even some people think it was going below the water. Mm-hmm. I even heard they had their weapons locked on it, and it just kind of taunted it. It knew what the distance was, and it just like took off. Mm-hmm. And there's great footage of it. And that was back in 2004. And I think it was 10 years later, maybe longer, they finally released it and said, all right, we don't know what this is.
Right. And even kind of that points that, because it reminds me of, I was watching that NASA press conference recently, and they were talking about, the stigma around talking about stuff. And they said, well, and people, there's a scientific process. We got to respect the scientific process, which I agree. We need to respect the scientific process. And he goes, but people want to know right away. And that adds to the stigma. And I thought maybe that does, but at the same time, something that happened in 2004, you're telling us about it now. So how much are you withholding? How much are you not telling us? What are you holding back? What kind of level of trust are you engendering when you do stuff like that? So they can say, well, when you want to know right away, it adds to the stigma. But you know what? When you're when you're not upfront, when you're not honest, when you're deceptive, that adds to the stigma too. And I don't like pointing fingers at the government or at other organizations, but there really is, if you're not being upfront and not being honest about stuff, you diminish the trust. And then what do you expect?
Right. Then people are going to freak out and say you're not telling the truth for sure.
Right. And of course, you could talk about our experimental craft. And well, what do we have for experimental craft? The general public doesn't know. I don't know. So could it be something of ours?
Especially in San Diego, where that's where Miramar is. And all
right. And then it's, is it something that's not ours, but was developed off of something that was not ours? So it's, lots and lots and lots of unanswered questions. If you get into ufology because you want the answers to all the questions, I hope you're either really good at holding your breath, or because again, I'm open to possibilities. That's where I stand in a realm of possibility where these things could be possible. These could be the conclusions, but I'm not really committed to anything because the history of humanity is like the history of being wrong about everything. We always think we know all the answers. And then sure enough, a few years later, we have this new discovery or something else comes out. And, the earth is round and the earth is sphere. We thought we knew it was flat. We were positive it was flat. Turns out the earth's not flat. Well, but our science said it was flat. Well, guess what? Our science was wrong. So, and it's just been a whole series of us being wrong again and again and again. So,
well, that's it, right? It gets to the pyramids and everything else unexplained, like in the portraits or the paintings from all, the history of the world. Mm-hmm. They all kind of have aliens involved in it.
Yeah.
So how do you explain that?
There's carvings, right? And caves. There's artifacts.
Do you want me to tip you off to something cool?
Yes.
So I'm going to go off in two different directions. So you said pyramids. So there is a website. I can plug someone else's website.
Sure.
So wisconsinfrights.com. Wisconsinfrights.com. That's a website with all sorts of stuff from Wisconsin, UFOs and other types of, and there's supposedly, I think it's Rice Lake in Wisconsin. Supposedly there is a pyramid under the lake. And sometimes when the water level is low enough, if you're boating by, you can see the top of the pyramid. And other people say they haven't seen it. Scuba divers have said they've seen it. Other people say they can't see it. Is it there all the time? Is it not there all the time? But so I think the whole pyramid thing is very interesting. And having a pyramid supposedly under a lake in Wisconsin is
that's
curious. But
awesome.
That's
that
drunken
close to home.
Scotties. There's no damn way.
Drunken Scotties.
I think it's on the east side too, so it's not that far from Green Bay. So WisconsinFrights.com. Wisconsin actually has 3 big UFO events every year, and I'm actually opening up the Elmwood Days in Wisconsin this year. It's a 3-day event, and I'm speaking Friday night in I think the auditorium in Elmwood High School. I'm speaking for like an hour and a half on because when I do my monthly presentations at Minnesota MUFON, I have a segment called What's Up in Minnesota where I talk about cases that have come in recently and cases that we've closed. So I'm going to do the very first edition of What's Up in Wisconsin, where I'm going to tell them all about what's in our database about Wisconsin cases, the most interesting ones. So we'll be talking. And so cool. They've got UFO days. Then they've got another one. I don't know what the second one is called, but of course,
Bobby Finn Days.
Again, it's Wisconsin. So what's the third one called? UFO Beer Days, because of course it's got to be beer days. UFO beer, because it's Wisconsin, right? Am I bagging on Wisconsin? Are you guys big in Wisconsin? Because if you're big in Wisconsin,
bag on
me after this podcast.
Bag on them all you want. Yeah,
but UFO Beer Days in Wisconsin. Well, of course, it's Wisconsin. What course are you going to get? So
right. Yeah, I've heard that there's giant pyramids. There's bigger pyramids than the Pyramid of Giza underwater in the oceans. And there's a huge one off the coast of Japan as well. And I don't know what you think about pyramids, but I've heard that they were energy sources for aliens. I've heard that they were built by aliens. I've heard that they were built by giants. I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of crazy questions. And here's something interesting about pyramids. And I was at my sister-in-law or my half-sister's house. This is a number of years ago. And I should have written the stuff down, but we were watching something on TV. It was an Alaskan show. And I didn't even say anything because her husband and my half-sister were sitting there. And I'm watching the show and they're out in the woods. And there's a guy talking and I'm looking at him. And I'm looking behind the guy and I'm going, it's got trees on it. It's wooded, but I'm going, that's not a mountain. I mean, that's a pyramid, and because mountains aren't shaped like that. And they didn't notice it. And I didn't say anything. So I wish I would have jotted the date down and jotted the show down so I could go back and watch the show. But, so there's stories of pyramids in Alaska. And I'm kind of looking at that going, he's standing in front of there's a pyramid right there. And no one's saying, and kind of like when we were sitting around the camp in St. Croix River, there's this lights going up and down the trees and no one's saying anything about it. There's a pyramid right on TV that I'm looking right at, covered with trees. So it's not stone like you think of the Egyptian pyramids, but it's not like a mountain. It looks like a mountain, but it doesn't look like a mountain. It looks like a pyramid. So
I thought you were going to say it was Groot.
Oh, Groot. Yeah,
I am Groot.
Yeah. He can't say hi, can he? Does he say hi?
I am Groot.
Yeah. You know, the other thing I've heard is that UFOs can disguise themselves as clouds. Like they look like clouds, and the next thing you know, that cloud is like dissipated and gone, and it was like, well, it was actually a UFO hiding as a cloud.
There is that theory. I've heard that too. I've seen some pictures of clouds that look very suspicious, but then you talk to your meteorologist, and the meteorologist will no, when the temperature's like this and the atmosphere is like this, that it stratifies, or I don't know all the technical terms. It looks like that. So
I would believe anything Belinda Jensen tells me, to be honest with you. I mean, she knows her stuff.
Yeah.
Top meteorologist for sure.
One thing she's ever said.
and she could be absolutely right. And it could also be true that some UFOs could disguise themselves that way. I mean, they could both be true. So, it's hard to say. So,
all right.
It's, like I said, there's the search for the answers goes on. So,
well, I mean, you get back to your Brazil one, because that one's, I mean, don't they have video and cameras and the military guy that had that alien dog or whatever the hell it was, he died, right?
Oh, well, the supposed UFO that crashed in Brazil, and the people were like, one guy died and the aliens were walking around. I guess there's a story about how a guy carried the alien who was injured, and he got this goop all over his arms. He got weird cancer and died because he had some crazy infection that was only, extraterrestrial, and then the military swoops up and picks them all up and brings them back. I don't know, which also kind of goes back to the Bob Lazar stories of Bob Lazar was a scientist or engineer who was working at Area 51, who's, on the books as working at Area 51. And he was hired to reverse engineer a spacecraft that the U.S. had captured and was at Area 51. And he's got a great documentary. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure you have, Tom, where he doesn't speak a lot, but he has come out and said some things, and he's got a documentary now. Somebody let them film him. And that to me too is pretty interesting, especially how he says these crafts had a reactor that actually harnessed or created its own gravity field. And that's why these things can move so fast. They don't have propulsion. They don't have fire that pushes them one way or another. They just have a gravity field that bends space and time.
0 point energy. Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense. So that's another thing. Just like, he's made a lot of claims, and he's taken lie detector tests and passed them, which, who knows? I don't know anything about him. I've just seen movies and shows and whatever.
I do want to touch on Area 51 real quick. Before that, back to the cameras. He said they had videotape of him down in Brazil. Well, the Las Vegas incident, supposedly where it landed in their backyard, their outdoor yard camera went off before that happened, but supposedly someone else got their video camera and did record the stuff. So supposedly they've got that, but it hasn't been released. But I could have swore I saw an image or two of some very tall creatures. Now, whether that was an actual image or some mock-up. So supposedly there may be footage of that too, which may or may not come out. But Area 51 and Bob Lazar is really interesting too, because remember how I said the right thumb doesn't know what the right forefinger is doing? As I understand it, at Area 51, there's lots of different stuff they're doing, and it's also very compartmentalized. So when this team or group wants to do something outside, all the others have to go inside. The windows are shut and no one can see it. So they go out and do their stuff. Once they're done, they all go inside. Then the next group can come out. So even the people at Area 51 don't necessarily know everything's going on at Area 51. Then you've got the Janus planes and all that other stuff. So, and I have been to the back gate of Area 51. So I survived.
Oh, you
that.
have.
So I've been to the back
gate. Were you
gate,
on the storm? What was that thing called a couple years ago? Storm Area 51. And
and that's MUFON. We took a very strong stance against Storm Area 51. It was not MUFON. So whether the government denies or admits the existence of Area 51, from our perspective, Area 51 is a government facility.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
We're private citizens. We're not going to raid a government facility. So when that story came out about all that happening, MUFON was kind of like, you know what? We're not going to be involved. We're not endorsing anyone to be involved. We're not encouraging anyone to be involved. And I wouldn't encourage anyone to be involved with that either. So I went to the back gate, which many people can do. I advise don't go to the front gate because that's not a good thing. But yeah, you can go to the back gate, take your pictures, and have your picture taken, because I'm sure my picture was taken quite a bit back there. So
Bobby stormed the Capitol. I don't know if you knew that before you,
Were you one of those
agreed to be on the
Capitol
pod, but
I
he was
was,
wearing horns and a leopard
The
skin.
capital of Hugh Hefner's grotto.
okay, cool.
That's about the only capital I've used.
You weren't in charge of skimming the stuff off the top of the water. Right?
I was not in charge of that.
Well, here's a sticky job.
Yeah.
So,
You might die from that goop too.
I don't know if I should have even said that.
That's fantastic.
That's
great.
So funny.
All right, Bobby.
What do you
Anything
think?
else?
Dick of the week.
Oh,
You
yeah. You
got
want to do
this
your
one.
Don't Be a Dick of the Week? We always do a Bobby's Don't Be a Dick of the Week.
Yeah, but you got this one.
I got this one. This doesn't have anything to do with UFOs, but how often do you get asked to tip somebody now? Like it's a coffee shop or a restaurant or a McDonald's or buying a beer at a Twins game. It already costs you $18. They turn that screen around, it's like, add a tip. And then the person looks at you with puppy dog eyes and you're like, really? Do you need a tip? There's a place in downtown where I work, like $15 salads, you're like a salad for $15, and then they turn the thing around, a little box salad. And you're like,
Least amount is 20%.
ask your boss for a tip. I just paid half my life savings to get this salad. I don't think everybody needs a tip. Like how have we got to a point where it's like, please give, like, I think there's certain people who deserve tips that don't ask for it. Like, maids at hotels where they're like cleaning your room every day. Like they deserve a tip, but I don't think the guy who's like pours me a light roast of coffee and sets it in front of me deserves a tip. It's just like, I think we've gotten out of control with it. And maybe it's the payment systems that are like,
now you're even adding their wages kind of it. I mean, they add another line like, take care of him for 7%.
Everything's so expensive. Maybe they should work that into the people's
that's
pay.
business, right?
Yeah, right.
I got a bag of, cause I golfed last night and I got a bag of High Noons and Coors Lights. And it was like $60.
The liquor store want a tip.
But it took him 3 minutes to just take these out of the cooler and put them in a bag and then fill it with ice. It was $60. So I'm like, do I give him $12?
Yeah, right.
I mean, are you kidding
right.
me? Nice guy, but geez.
It's
I don't know. But you feel so obligated to do it. And like you said,
and
somebody
you want to
puts
help
their puppy
people
dog
out.
eyes, you're like, here, they have one more question for you. No, I'll fucking deny that question. Pardon me. Yeah.
I'm gonna get a tip. And then sometimes, I swear to God, sometimes when you hit the tip button, it does, or you say no tip, it doesn't work. And then they're like, oh, that didn't go through. And you're like,
Yeah, they doubling down on me. Yeah. Right.
yeah. So there it is. We had to fit that in there. The Don't Be a Dick of the Week. So I don't know. I think we've covered a lot. Tom, is there anything you wanted to hit on before we let you go?
Of course, because my chapter would be so upset with me if I didn't tell you how you can find us. So our
Heck
website,
yeah.
Tom's one of the newest members.
Are you one of our?
You just thanked me.
Cool.
You thanked me on
Very
Facebook.
cool. Oh,
Yep.
okay. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So we try to meet in person every month at the New Brighton Community Center on the second Saturday of every month. We open our doors at 1:00. We start the presentation at 2:00. We go till about 5:00. I start off with announcements, and then what's up in Minnesota. I tell you what cases we've recently closed and what cases have recently come in. Then we have presentations. It's a great place for people to come and chat. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people come up to me during the break and say, you know what? I can't talk to my friends about this. I can't talk to my family about this. I can't talk about this at work. But here, I can come and I can share and I can get this off my chest. And I can be heard and believed and be listened to. So it really is beneficial for people to do that. So it's a nice place where people can go and share stuff and not be judgmental. And some people are like, I don't know, but I want to hear stuff. So some people go to hear the stories of other people. So it's a very welcoming crew. It's very, very friendly crew. So yeah, I definitely want to come on down. And you know what? I don't know if I've made any mistakes here on this podcast today, but you want to see me make mistakes? Come to our meetings. You'll see me like flub up stuff and mispronounce things and forget stuff. And it's really entertaining. It's a lot of fun. Trust me. So yeah. And we charge $5 for MUFON members and $7 for guests or non-members. So, and we do also, we do it online too. So if you can't join us in person, you can join us on Zoom. We get you the link so you can join us virtually too. We try to, ideally, we're in person and on Zoom every month. Sometimes we've just been in person. Sometimes we've only been on Zoom, but So if you follow us on Facebook, get on our mailing list and check us. We're on Meetup too. I think on Meetup, we're the Twin Cities UFO Research Organization. So that's us. And we advertise our meetings there too. So you can keep up with where our meetings are and what our topics are and what we got coming up. So
Great.
Awesome. I mean, it sounds like AA for UFOers.
Get it out there. It's like therapy. Get it off your chest.
Go
Talk
find
about
other
it. No
people
one's.
I think
everybody's
JT
gonna-
Bernier might be there.
He's going to support you.
He's one of our neighbors. I'll say, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
Appreciate you coming in because you got good energy. You're a positive person.
Sure.
You had fun telling stories. It's
There's got to be
ask
something
questions.
out there.
It's gotta
There has
be.
to We can't
We
be
had-
that naive,
We had
right?
to explain to Bobby how the universe was still expanding, and he's like, well, I don't know what that means. And he's like, it's infinite. What do you mean it's infinite? It keeps going. That doesn't make any sense to me.
That's what I was like, what is there a guy painting with a black paintbrush at the end of the galaxy?
It just doesn't
I'm
end.
like, I don't know. Maybe you're right. I don't know. It's confusing. It's exciting. Nothing makes sense, but you got to have an open mind.
Well, and two, and this is, people think Big Bang and they think of the single point. It's all expanding from that single point is one theory, but another theory is it's more, as opposed to it all expanding from a single point, it's more like a donut, and the donut is expanding. So you could travel in a straight line, you'd be circling around the donut, and not really going anywhere. So the donut could be getting bigger and bigger. And there's a shift in your paradigm. You can go, wow, is it really one point expanding, or is it a donut expanding, and something like that? So
That's
Well, didn't that new telescope look at a solar system or a galaxy and discover that what the Big Bang had told us wasn't true, because that galaxy shouldn't be there right now because it's older than what was currently written?
Yeah, and I know I'd heard a story too where there was like a supernova in a galaxy that was further away than we thought the edge of the universe was, and poof, now we're seeing something way out there. And so, but yeah, and there's more and more scientists I've heard are I don't taking their name off the whole Big Bang theory, because there's things, if the Big Bang theory is correct, we should see things. The way things are cooling should be in a certain pattern, and it's not cooling in the way we think. It's cooling very evenly, as opposed to it being kind of disparate how it's cooling. And you think where it banged, it'd be getting cooler there first and more hot, but it all seems to be very even. So there's not that. So some scientists really question the Big Bang theory, and
When Bobby gets banged, would you get pretty hot, or do you not get too hot?
Unless if I have my cool boys, our chill boys.
Chill boys, you don't get too hot.
So.
But all I can think of Homer Simpson eating this huge donut that's getting bigger and bigger.
I was about to make a Homer Simpson comment about that too when you talked about the telescope. Yeah, they did find that galaxy. Homer Simpson would go,
That's great. Well, thanks, Tom, for coming. I appreciate everything.
Cool.
It's been, like I said, it's been very cool. But hey, everyone, thanks for listening. We can be heard on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and other platforms where you get your podcast. Please like, subscribe, and tell a friend about us. Last of all, just like I learned growing up on the East Side, work hard. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Tell it like it is. Help your neighbors. Try to contribute in a positive way. Smile, laugh, be a good person. Most of all, it's pretty simple. Don't be a dick.
That's yesterday. Yeah, yesterday.
So he was out doing his patrol very close to the North Dakota border, and he was going on the highway, and there was like an intersection. It looked like down the highway on the intersection, he saw a light down there. He said it appeared to be about the size of a volleyball. He thought it was too high off the ground to be a car. He thought maybe a plane had come down or something like that. So he turned to investigate, and I don't remember if he was a quarter mile away or a mile and a half away or something like that, but it was quite a distance away. And then instantly, it was like right on top of him, is how he described it. And he remembers hearing glass shattering, and then he doesn't remember anything until he woke up. And
He had all chipped teeth, I heard, and burns on his eyes, like welder's burns on his eyes.
He may have had chipped teeth. I'd have to check. That does sound familiar, but yeah, he had what they described as mild welder's burns. His car had skidded off the side of the road. It skidded like, I think, about 100 feet or 100, and it was turned sideways. And when he woke up, so no one knew about it till he woke up. When he woke up, he radioed for help, and the officer arrived on scene, and they called for an ambulance. And they did find out eventually. They realized that his watch and his car, the clocks were still synced, but they were off by 14 minutes from the clock at headquarters. So there was there's our missing time, which people you tell, where's the missing time? So where do those 14 minutes or stuff go?
Yeah, yesterday.
That, I mean, it gets to the pyramids and everything else unexplained, like in the portraits or the paintings from all, you know, the history of the world. They all kind of have aliens involved in it.
Yeah,
So how do you explain that?
There's carvings, right? And caves. There's artifacts.
Do you want me to tip you off to something cool?
Yes.
So I'm going to go off in two different directions. So you said pyramids. So there is a website. I can plug someone else's website.
Sure.
So wisconsinfrights.com. That's a website with all sorts of stuff from Wisconsin, UFOs and other types of, you know, and there's supposedly, I think it's Rice Lake in Wisconsin. Supposedly there is a pyramid under the lake. And sometimes when the water level is low enough, if you're boating by, you can see the top of the pyramid. And other people say they haven't seen it. Scuba divers have said they've seen it. Other people say they can't see it. Is it there all the time? Is it not there all the time? But so I think the whole pyramid thing is very interesting. And having a pyramid supposedly under a lake in Wisconsin is
That's
curious. But
awesome.
That's
that
drunken
close to home.
Scotties. There's no damn way.
Drunken Scotties. Drunken
Those
Scotties.
packets, I think it's on the east side too, so it's not that far from Green Bay. So WisconsinFrights.com. Wisconsin actually has 3 big UFO events every year.
Yeah, yesterday.
You know, the other thing I've heard is that UFOs can disguise themselves as clouds. Like they look like clouds, and the next thing you know, that cloud is like dissipated and gone, and it was like, well, it was actually a UFO hiding as a cloud.
There is that theory. I've heard that too. I've seen some pictures of clouds that look very suspicious, but then you talk to your meteorologist and the meteorologist go, no, when the temperature's like this and the atmosphere is like this, that it stratifies, or I don't know all the technical terms. It looks like that. So
I would believe anything Belinda Jensen tells me, to be honest with you. I mean, she knows her stuff.
Yeah.
Top meteorologist for sure.
One thing she's ever said.
and she could be absolutely right. And it could also be true that some UFOs could disguise themselves that way. I mean, they could both be true. So